to creating suspense. My big suspense until this morning, well, until right now, was, will I be talking to an empty room? So I'm absolutely thrilled that I'm not. Thank you very much for coming. We only have an hour. So what I'm going to try to do is run through the slides, and then when I get to the end, I'll take whatever questions we have time for. If we don't get to your question and you'd like to have a chat with me, you will find me in the bar. Okay, so who am I? Good question. Why am I? Where am I? All these questions. I'm Val Penny. I'm an author, I'm a full-time author. I'm traditionally published by an indie press. I have self-published one book. It was the most traumatic event of my life, and so I am not going to do that again, ever. I review books, I'm a book reviewer. Please do not send me your books to review because I already have a pile this high. If you want me to review your book, please contact me on Facebook or Messenger or Twitter, something like that, and I will come back to you and tell you what the time scale is. It may not be the time scale that's good for your publication date. I'm a published poet, usually in anthologies. I haven't done any collections yet. There are some superb poetry collections in the book room for those of you who are poetry minded. And for my poor little students, I am a writing tutor. I lecture, I was a university lecturer. I now lecture writing, and I do that on a weekly, sometimes daily basis. So I have a lot going on, as I'm sure we all do. So, technology is not my main thing.
Is it possible to close the door? Because,
I'll shut the door.
Oh, that's...
It might get stuffy up. The door's open over there.
Yeah, the door is open there, Lance,
yeah,
yes.
it's the other group.
So,
Sorry, there's nothing...
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
You're coming in very well.
And we thought that's very rude.
Yeah.
Oh, bless your heart. Nobody talks over me for terribly long. So, first of all, what is suspense? Suspense is tension, and the reader needs to feel that. They need, in any story, no matter what the genre, if you know exactly what is going to happen, it is very boring. And so either during a single scene or a chapter, or even throughout your overall arc, you want suspense. Thank you so much, Joy. Joy was my lovely photographer today. Thank you very much. And you can create suspense around anything that gets the reader's interest or curiosity. It doesn't matter whether you're writing a romance and you have a love triangle. He's great to do it.
that's a bit of suspense.
It's just fallen over, that's why they're laughing.
But it's in the right position.
Exactly.
But that creates some suspense.
It did, yes, thank you. It doesn't matter whether it's a love triangle. It doesn't matter whether it's a lost dog. It doesn't matter if it's a killer on the loose. The reader cannot know exactly what's going to happen. The most times I see lack of suspense is actually in memoirs. And memoirs are difficult because if you start by saying, I was born on the 18th of October, come in ladies, lovely to see you. If you start by saying I was born on the 18th of October and I was christened on the 5th of May and I went to nursery and I went to primary school. By page 10, your reader has glazed over, closed the book and put it away. I read a book very recently which fell into this category. It was called Lone Survivor. Now the second half of the book is really, really exciting because it's about a special forces guy who got caught by or trapped by the Afghan Taliban and how he was rescued. That was really exciting. The first bit of it was about growing up in Texas and having to go around various people whose sons had died, and how he became interested in the special forces. And the first half was really turgid because it was like reading somebody's diary. You know, it was sunny today. Fabulous. So, how are we going to use tension? We're going to use it to, suspense, we're going to use heighten the tension, we're going to use it during dramatic scenes, we're going to hide things from our readers, and we're going to put in a little twist so that they don't know exactly what's happening. The whole thing is to keep your reader turning the pages. And now I'm going to get on to my hobby horse. I won't stay here for long, I promise. But there is a book published on Amazon every 5 minutes. Waking and sleeping every 5 minutes. So, if your readers do not enjoy your books, if they find them boring, your books will not sell. Simple as that. And they won't sell because nobody will know that they're there, because they won't get the lift from being in Amazon. There are other booksellers, I know that, but I think it's something like 4 of every 10 books. Is it 5 of every 10 books now that is sold through Amazon? And during lockdown it was a great deal more than that. So I write crime thrillers, and suspense is probably most obviously used in mystery stories and thrillers. But it should be present in every work of fiction. I know that in the room here we have the queen of flash fiction, Alison over there. Do you get tension and suspense into a flash?
Yes, sometimes I can do it on the very last word.
Yeah, exactly. It can be the very last word, quite right. And that's what we want. We want that reader's curiosity to drive them forward, to finish our book and buy the next one. So, story structure and suspense. There are two different types of suspense that you will use in hopefully everything that you write. There's narrative suspense and there's short-term suspense. And with narrative suspense, that's going to run through the whole of the story or the book. If it's a romance, it might be, will they, won't they? If it's a crime thriller, who is the perpetrator? The second type of suspense, short-term suspense, is just as important. And that is going to keep your work interesting scene to scene. And the reason that's important is at the end of every chapter, you want to draw the reader in so that they are sufficiently interested to read on. You want them to read on. Another writer in the room who is very good at that is Joy Wood. She does the most fabulous books, and I always take Joy's books to bed early because I know I'm going to read for a longer time than usual because of that end of chapter hook that's going to get me going and make me want to read on. Owes me a good night's sleep, that woman does. Right. So, narrative or long-term suspense. This is going to build through the whole story. Now, when I'm writing a novel, I usually have 3 intertwined plots, and I do this on purpose. I do it partly because that's the way I learned to do it, and partly because that's what I like to read. So I usually have the main plot, which is, for me, crime. I'm going to have some sort of a romantic thread. I admit it's often tin, but in the second book, Hunter's Revenge, and the first book of the new series, The First Cut, it's Jane and Rachel. So you're going to have that, but I also try and put in a comedy thread, because crime thrillers can be quite dark, and I'm not crazy on dark, hugely dark. So I tend to have my comedy couple, Jamie and Frankie, who are the worst villains in the world, and they will keep that story going. But whether you have a series of plots and subplots, or whether you just have one story told succinctly and well, the suspense should make it really hard for your reader to put the book down. But if you're going to tease your reader for 300-400 pages, you really need a good ending. And that's why stories with a lot of suspense in them often culminate either in a plot twist, as I think Alison was talking about, or a big reveal. Now, when you're constructing narrative suspense, you want to keep your readers in suspense? No, you want to keep them reading, but you also want to give them something. Otherwise, if it becomes too much of a trial for them, again, they're going to get bored. So you want to hint that there's going to be some kind of a resolution. You want to foreshadow, you want to give them clues as to what is going to take place. And the best way to temper that is with character development. Is the character that they're concentrating on a decent character whom they can rely on? Is it an unreliable narrator? You need to give them some kind of clue as you go along. I like short-term suspense. I think it's a lot of fun. And it is just what it says on the tin. It's a little moment, it's a short scene, it's a powerful reaction needed from the reader. At the beginning of Hunter's Chase, I start with Jamie. And although Jamie's a villain, he is my favourite, I admit. I do have favourites, and he's it. And at first, what the reader sees is Jamie walking along the street in his work uniform. Okay? Then we discover that his work uniform is black trousers, a black hoodie, new cheap black shoes that are a size too small for him, and he's going out on the rob. And why is he going out to steal? Because Dad's in the clink and Jamie wants to make him proud. So we've gone from this young man walking down a rainy street in his work uniform to a complete toe rag who's going to burgle the first house he comes across. And without giving too much away, the house he chooses to burgle is a politician's house. Not just any politician's house, of course. The next little nugget is that it's the politician who worked really hard to get people who were released from prison taken back into the workforce so that they wouldn't reoffend. So we have Jamie not only burgling, but burgling a house of the man whose hand fed him. And later on in the scene, in a further scene, slightly further on in the book, when the two of them are talking, because the politician catches up with Jamie, and he says to him, you know, I worked so hard for you. Why did you choose my house to rob? And Jamie just looks at him and says, well, whose house would you rather I'd burgled? So you need a little bit of comedy to leaven the cake. Cliffhangers are the very fundamental idea of short-term suspense. And these should go at the end of scene or chapter endings so that the reader gets a little feeling of relief and achievement that they've got this far. But cut your story off at critical moments so that you know the reader is going to want to read on and know what happens next. Because that's the fun bit as an author, is when you get a message from a reader who says, I really enjoyed your book. I stayed up till 2 in the morning just to get it finished. That's a fabulous feeling. Now, there are different kinds of narrative and short-term suspense. The first kind I'd like to look at is mysterious suspense. It can be used either as narrative or short-term. It is often used in thrillers and mystery novels, of course. And what you're doing there is you're concealing something, you're holding something back from the reader. They know it's being held back, but they don't know exactly what's being held back or exactly what you're going to do about it. So Agatha Christie was the queen of mysterious suspense. If you, I take it we've all read some Agatha Christie, if not a lot, and if you look at some of her books, or most of her books, there will be that mysterious suspense. You're going to have the house in the middle of nowhere, your 12 people, all of whom could be victims or perpetrators, and then you're going to have a plot twist at the end, and it's going to be perfectly obvious because Poirot's going to tell you how it was done. At the end of your story or your book, you need a proper ending. You need all the loose ends to tie up. When I wrote the first book, Hunter's Chase, because I had these three strands, if you like, I didn't tie them all up. And at that time I was particularly green about the publishing industry. And so I sent my book off to 2 different publishers, knowing in my heart that they would be thrilled to hear from me. And then I came to Swanwick, and I had a lovely week, and I went back home, and I had 2 emails, both requesting my book. So in a way, I was right. But the company that I chose then put a house editor in to straighten me out. And the first thing she said to me was, well, you've not tied up that loose end, you've not tied up that loose end, and I want to know what happens there. So sort that out and send it back to me. And I thought, I said, no, you don't get it. Because remember, I know nothing. I said, you don't get it. I'm writing a series, and I'll sort that out later down the line. She said, what if I only read 1 book? Well, that never occurred to me. Why would you do that? So, the bold Val gets down to her computer and sorts everything out. And I sent it back to her. And she said to me, right, okay, that's that bit done. Now, I think we'll need to sort out this, that, and the other. And you have no idea how trying and how very upsetting being edited can be. I mean, there you have what my husband refers to as my great octopus, my magnum opus, which is perfect in every word and phrase. And this woman tells me it can be improved. And you know something? She was absolutely right. So when you're dealing with suspense, make sure that you use it to its ultimate effect, whatever kind of work you're writing. There's another kind of suspense which again can be used short-term or long-term, and it depends on what you write. Horrific suspense. And if you write horror, I don't read a lot of horror, but I've read a couple of books this year. I've read The Stairwell by Dean Bryant, which does not read like a first novel. And I've also read The Dark Chorus by Ashley Megott, and that is fabulous. It's such an original concept. Fabulous book. And both of them use horrific suspense. The story that I think best projects this kind of suspense is The Pit and the Pendulum by Edgar Allan Poe. Is anybody familiar with that one?
Yeah.
He's an American author who wrote horror, mystery type things. And I think his writing's fabulous, I love it. But The Pit and the Pendulum, the idea is that this guy is tied down and there's a pendulum up above him that keeps lowering. And the question is he going to get chopped up by it, or is he going to escape? I'm not going to tell you what happens, go away and read it. It's a fabulous piece of writing. Now, you can obviously use mysterious suspense and horrific suspense in the same piece of work. Absolutely no reason why not. use them properly. With mysterious suspense, your reader is wondering who done it, what happened, that kind of reaction. With horrific suspense, it's something particularly unpleasant and they don't know whether or when it's going to happen again. Now, romantic and comedic suspense. Romantic suspense, I think the prime relatively modern example of that is Bridget Jones' Diary. And the will she, won't she. And you've got comedic suspense in there. She's busy making the meal for her friends and she ties the, I think it's asparagus, together with blue string and she ends up with blue soup. So, you know, you have that, she's doing her best. She knows she is not a good cook. But the viewer in this case, or if you're reading the book, the reader, doesn't know exactly what's going to go wrong with the meal. And then the blue soup turns up. And the romantic suspense there, will she, won't she, with her boss, or with, I keep wanting to say Mr. Darcy, Colin Firth. Then again, that runs throughout the whole arc of the book, and it's very cleverly done. But again, at the end of every chapter, at the beginning of every chapter, you're going to have that link, that suspense, something to draw you forward. And as a reader, that's what makes the reading satisfying, isn't it? If you feel that you're actually getting something back, and you're maybe having to do a wee bit of thinking, so that it's not just entirely obvious what's going on. The reason I'm not giving you exactly what's on the screen is that I'm going to put those up on the, well, I say I'm going to do it. Lance is actually probably going to do it for me. Put it up on the website. So, when we are writing, we want to build that suspense for as long as we can. We want to give the audience a few answers, not enough of an answer. We want to reference the suspense arc so they know what they're looking for, but we don't want them to feel that everything's given to them on a plate, because that's not going to make the book interesting. Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is quite difficult, but it is necessary. You want to make it clear to your reader that this particular thing is going to be important. You don't want to tell them why, because we're building suspense, remember, but we want them to know that they have to pay attention to this bit. So, foreshadowing may be something like Jamie's dad being in prison. It may be that he's chosen to rob absolutely the wrong household. But we need to make the character sufficiently interesting that our reader is going to empathise with him. Jamie is a tyke. We all know that now. But we have to make the reader love him, because otherwise why would they care? So we're going to present that object or character that's going to be important later in the plot. We're going to apparently reveal all the secrets, but we're going to be sufficiently vague that our readers can come back to that. Flashbacks. Right. As a rule, I'm not crazy about reading books that jump time frames unless they are very well done. I need to know if I'm in 1953 or 1973 or 2021. I want to know. So if you're going to use a flashback to ratchet up suspense, and it can be done perfectly well, what you might consider doing at the top of each of your chapters or parts of your story is just put the date. So that if part of it takes place in 1953 and part of it takes place in the present day, all you do is put 1953, 2021, 2021, 1953. That's all you have to do. But if you're going to use flashbacks and red herrings, they have to mean something in the rest of the story. They have to build that suspense, build that interest. Don't just use them because it fills another 10,000 words and the publisher says they like books at 100,000. That's no use. Margaret, I've got a wee glass of water. Do you want to sip on the other side, Pet?
Thanks,
There you go, my
Val.
darling. You just take that.
Thank you, no problem.
Right, I'm conscious I'm running out of time. Placing your characters in jeopardy. Now, this is always good fun. I do like placing them in jeopardy. Now, I think the most obvious start to a novel where the character was in jeopardy was when, again, this is a flashback, it's a prologue. And a prologue is always going to be different in time or place to the rest of the novel. That's why you would have one. So in this case, George is back in Eastern Germany. Wasn't even East Germany then, oh, yes it was. And I'm going to place him in a very difficult situation because he celebrates his birthday. He comes out of the pub, one of the Stasi is there, and George, in a fit of youthful excitement, knocks his hat off. Not a good idea with the Stasi. And so from there, we get the jeopardy that George is in, and that's how we discover he got from East Germany to Scotland. And some years later, poor wee soul, he got murdered. But that's the risk you take if you're in one of my books. Don't matter if I like you. You could be gone. But again, it only matters if the readers care about you, if they care about the character, the subject matter. So in Hunter's Revenge, we know that George is a colleague of Hunter's by the time he gets murdered, and Hunter's going to take his revenge on George's killer. And this is actually my last slide, so we will have 10 minutes for questions. I'm quite pleased about that. Whenever you're using suspense, however you're using suspense, you must stay one step ahead of your reader. Now, just out of interest, how many here are writing or have written novels? Oh, fabulous. Well, thank you very much. I know about yours.
I know about yours.
Well, there you go. Is yours in the book room?
Yes.
Good man. It's a quote from Lance that's on the front of my new book that's just come out. So I was he's my friend right now. But you want to stay one step ahead. When you're writing your novels, how many are plotters? How many plot in advance? Great. How many are pantsers? You just sort of go with the flow. Yep, okay. I go half and half. But Sue Moorcroft, who is not here this year, and I'm very sorry about that, gives a wonderful course on writing romantic novels, but you can apply it to any kind of novel. And she is a plotter to the nth degree. And for the book that's coming out at Christmas, I used Sue's tips. And it's lovely. I know exactly what happens to whom when, and all I need to do is transcribe it from the notebook to the computer. I'm fair away with myself. Anyway, whichever you are, it's easier to do if you're a plotter. Stay one step ahead. Make sure that you're keeping a little bit back so that when the end comes, you still have something to give your reader. That's terribly important, because otherwise they're going to feel cheated.
I'll just say, you just mentioned Sue Moorcroft, and the first year I attended Swanwick, Sue gave a course, and the biggest tip I took out of that, and I've used it, and I see it in your writing as well, Val, is referring back to one of the first slides, the end of a chapter. She's got a little mantra that she has, is don't let the reader turn the light out.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Don't let the reader turn the light out. That's a good one. Yes. Right. We do have about 7 minutes for questions if anyone has them. Oh no, wait a minute. What time is that? 10:02? Oh, fab. We've got lots of time for questions. Oh, that's marvellous. Assuming anybody has them. I'll tell you a funny story about that. There is another lady who's lecturing here this week, and she said to me, she said, when I'm giving a talk, I always plant somebody at the back to ask the first question. And I go, oh, that's a good idea. I've never thought about that. And guess what? I didn't do it again today. So, does anybody have any questions? Yes?
What do you think on the length of sentences in Suspense part of the plot?
Okay, Debbie's asking me what I think about the length of sentence in suspense, the suspenseful part of the story. I will use one-word sentences on occasion. What I don't do with a piece of suspense is write a long, flowery description. I'm not actually sure people want a long, flowery description now. I mean, it was very, very Charles Dickens, but we've moved on a bit since then. So if I'm looking for the kind of suspense or twist that's going to surprise the reader and capture their interest, which is what I want to do, then yes, I'm going to do that in a series of fairly short sentences. Often I'll do it in dialogue, because I write a lot of dialogue in my books. But if it's not dialogue, then it's going to be quite short. For example, when Jamie's walking down the road in his shoes that are a size too small so that the police can't find him, I just have this one word at the end of the paragraph: genius. And that's, Jamie thinks he is a genius. Nothing could be further from the truth. Yes, Lance?
I'm the plant at the back of the room.
Bless your heart.
She's so cunningly potted. How do you feel about building suspense by deliberately varying the pace through fast and slow pace? And I want to give a good example of this, because when Jamie gets chased by Sir Peter, the chase is suspenseful, and it has, without doing spoiler, it does have a pretty shocking end, and then the pace, so that's really fast, and then it just slows down to when Sir Peter's talking to Jamie.
Yes, that's right. A story or a novel that is entirely suspense is going to be just as bad as one that has none at all. We're back to the memoir where you were born on the 18th of October and christened in May. I mean, it's really, that's not going to do it for people. But unless you're going to have the Vicar of Dibley doing the christening, something like that, that's going to be a bit of a twist. But assuming that it's just a memoir and it's da-di-da-di-da-di-da, don't do it. If you want to write a memoir, then sometimes, and all of us have this period, you'll have a period of maybe 3, maybe 6 months that were so different in your life than the rest of your life. So yes, have, a quick bit on, I was born on the 18th of October and lived in, Swanwick, so on and so forth. But quickly get to that 3 or 6 month period that you're going to concentrate on, and then why that was important in the rest of your life. Now, Tracy, I think you had your hand up next.
What's the average length of your manuscript? Plus, what would you say is the minimum and the maximum amount of words that you say for a traditional publisher?
For a publisher, right, okay. I'm going to start with a funny story. When Hunter's Chase came out, and I've been with the same publishers throughout, they've changed their name, but I can still see through it. And Hunter's Chase came out, and it was based, as all the Hunter series are, it's based in Edinburgh in Scotland. And the publisher very kindly came from the south of France to Edinburgh to attend my first launch, which I thought was really good of them. I did not pay for that. And the publisher sat with, or one of the directors from the publishing company, I should say, came over, not the whole shebang, just one. And he sat beside me when I was doing my launch presentation. And then I opened the floor for questions. And were there any questions pointed at me? Not a single one. They were all pointed to him. And one of the questions that was asked was, what length of manuscript are you looking for? Now, at that time, this company still published novellas. They don't do it anymore. But they did then, and at that time they were looking for a minimum of 30,000 words for a novella and a maximum of 90,000 words for a novel. If you are a first-time writer and you're sending your first manuscript to a publisher, what you do not want to do is send them your great octopus, your magnum opus of 500 pages, because they won't publish it. They will not take a chance on you. Even if you look at J.K. Rowling's books, the first ones are much, much thinner than the books at the end of the series when she was a known quantity and they knew they'd make their money back. The same is true of Ian Rankin. His early books are small, are much shorter than the ones he's writing now. Mark Billingham's the same. So what you want to do as a first-time writer, if you're sending them a novel, you're probably looking at 60 to 90,000 words. Some of the presses will take longer books, and I know that genres vary, because immediately I have fantasy and sci-fi authors telling me, but I can't create my world in less than 400 pages. And I know all that. Problem is, publishers are in the business to make money. If you make money, that's a bonus, but they want to make money. How do they do that? Publishers, reputable publishers, whether they are the big six or whether they are independent presses or wherever, they will never, never, never ask you to pay up front anything, not a penny. If a publisher, it is also very unusual for a publisher to contact you. The chances are, if they do, they are what is known as vanity press.
They are, at the moment, emailing independent authors like myself.
Yes.
Telling me how marvellous my books are, but they could be improved, and would I like to get in touch with them. And you just Google them and you know exactly who they are.
Absolutely. Well, the worst ones that I've come across are Austen Macaulay. They're the most prolific. I say that and I don't care if they sue me, because I have right on my side in vino veritas and all that. But you will never, to a reputable publisher, pay anything up front. So up front, what is the publisher going to do? They're going to spend a lot of money on you. They're going to spend money, firstly, getting your manuscript read by 2 or 3 different people. Assuming everybody thinks it's good enough to work with, because I now know it ain't good enough to publish it, we're just going to work with it. So assuming they're going to work with it, they think they can work with it, they're then going to assign you an editor. Depending on the size of the publishing house, there may be different types of editing going on, but that's a whole different ballgame. So they're going to assign you to an editor. And they're going to pay for, first of all, the readers, then the editors. Then they're going to put together a book cover, and they're going to pay for that. And they're going to pay for someone to write the blurb. And then they're going to pay for some kind of launch day promotion. Even with the big 6, the budget for almost every author is zilch. Absolutely nothing. It'll be a tweet, it'll be an Instagram post. It won't cost them anything. Because even the big six authors choose, the big six publishers choose which of the novels that they are putting out this year is going to be their flagship novel. So one of the most obvious ones was Paula Hawkins' Girl on a Train. I don't know how many of you have read it, I don't know how many of you have seen the film. It's fine. It's not an absolutely fabulous novel, but it's fine. But her publishers decided that this was the next big thing. So she's a New York top 10 bestseller, #1 bestseller. She's got her film deals, and all the rest of the books that she writes, whether they're good, bad or indifferent, will all sell. That's fabulous. All the other authors in her stable will have had a fraction, a tiny fraction of the money that was spent on promoting her
May I
sent to
ask
them.
why then? Because I've read it, and yes, it was fine.
Yeah,
I'm saying.
yeah.
I know better, right? I mean, I've read better books. Why did they choose her, please?
I'm sorry, I don't know. That's in the lap of the gods.
It is, isn't it?
It really is in the lap of the gods. Another question?
My question's relating to what you're saying about resolution and tying everything up.
Yes.
So I'm writing a travel memoir. I'm happy to learn through this that I have got suspense in it, and I have got conflict, and I've got mini resolutions.
Excellent, that's exactly what you're looking for.
But I don't know that I've got an overall resolution, and what I might end up with is as many questions as solutions.
What I think you might want to do is to go back to your original manuscript. Years and years ago, when I was a kid, I decided I was going to read every book in the library. And it was only a little later that I discovered that they lent books to other people and they took some books out before I had read them, which personally I thought was cheating. However, one of the books that I read was a travel memoir of a father and son who, and I cannot remember the name of it, I wish I could because it was fascinating. It was about a father and son who had gone across Canada on the train. And you know, the sort of rocky train ride, and it was just them starting at Toronto and going all the way across to Vancouver, and it was just a delightful book. But the main story was being on the train with his son, and they would get off and they'd go and visit Calgary, and they went and visited all these sort of places, and it was lovely. So every chapter had a little bit of suspense because you didn't know whether the beds were going to fall down and knock him on the head, or it doesn't have to be huge, or whether their dinner table was going to be ready for them at the right time, that sort of thing. But in the end of the day, the overreaching arc of the story was the improvement and fondness in that relationship between father and son, which had been fine at the beginning, but by the end they had this really deep bond of something they had done together. Now, it may be in your travel memoir you're talking about somewhere really exciting, and the overreaching arc is you didn't know much about the place when you started, but you know a great deal more about it now, or something like that. There's no doubt you can have an arc in a travel memoir in the same way you can with anything else.
Maybe the resolution has to be an internal one rather.
Absolutely. And that's an internal resolution is perfectly valid. Yes. Sorry, Angela. Sorry, I'll come back to you.
This is a big question, really.
Okay.
Why do you think crime fiction is so popular? And also, why is it so damn difficult to write? I started writing a comic crime novel, and I hadn't got a clue, and I had to abandon it. So it's two questions there, sorry.
No, two questions. One, why is crime writing so popular, or crime fiction so popular, and why is it difficult to write? The answer to the first question is quite interesting. Every author, every writer should know their reader. So I write crime, and I know that the vast number of my readers are nicely brought up, middle-aged women who have never been closer to a crime than their church minister has. I know this. And that's fine. I'm okay with that. If crime fiction in Scotland is the most popular type of crime, same in Scandinavia, popular type of crime, popular type of fiction, same in Scandinavia, I think it has to do with the Dark Knights, I'll be honest.
Scott's character.
Well, maybe, who knows. But if you go further south or across the Atlantic, in England and in the USA, the most popular kind of fiction is romance, often historical romance. So you pick your market. Why is it difficult to write? All good fiction is difficult to write. There's no easy answer. If you want to look at comic crime, try M.C. Beaton. M.C. Beaton wrote Agatha Raisin, Debbie's nodding at me, Agatha Raisin and Hamish Macbeth. And I heard her speak once, and she said to me, we were at a crime conference, and my husband and I went up to speak to her. My husband is 6'4" and built like the proverbial. So two of us went up to her, and she said, I said, you know, how did you like, was it Robert Carmichael that played Hamish Macbeth? Carlyle, sorry. Robert Carlyle. I said, how did you like his portrayal of that? She said, oh, didn't like him. Wee Glasgow, she says. Oh, I didn't like him. She said, I wrote a great big 6'4" Highlander. I wrote you, she says to my husband. And my husband is quite quiet. He always complains he doesn't get a word in edgeways, so he has no choice but to be quiet. And he just blushed. And the following year I was back at the same conference, and I saw her again, and I went up to speak to her, and I said, you know, how much we'd enjoyed her books that we'd bought previously. And she said, so where's Hamish? Now, my husband's name's Dave, and I got a bit perplexed. And then I remembered, oh yes, he's at home. So someone had to look after the cat. So why is crime fiction difficult to write? All good fiction is difficult to write, but I think M.C. Beaton is the queen of comic crime. So I would read her stuff if I were you. Now there was one other, sorry, I'll take you, and then I'll let you all go. How's that? Sorry, your question.
I've just finished a crime novel, and I'm perplexed as to what to do with it. Should I send it to an agent? Should I send it to a publisher? Should I
Do you want an agent?
Because of their expertise.
Well, I've had two in my time.
And they don't always work for you.
Well, I've had two in my time. The first one went off and got pregnant, so that was the end of her. And the second one I sacked because she was busy using my ideas and my contacts for her other people. So I'm quite happy without an agent at present, thank you very much. Remember, an agent cannot do anything that you cannot do yourself. There are some of the big publishers who will only take work that is submitted by an agent, but almost all of them now have imprints that don't require agents. So if you want an agent, fine, go look for one. But if you don't want one, don't get one. Sending it off to a publisher, well, as I say, I'm not really the person to ask because I was so green when I did it. What I would say, if you decide to send it to either a publisher or an agent, make sure firstly they like the type of thing you write. You say you write crime. Do you write thrillers, horror crime, cozy crime? Is it literary fiction? What kind of crime do you write? Make sure that whoever you send it to actually deals with what you write, because otherwise they either don't respond or they'll just reject you. And some people have enough rejection slips to paper their bathrooms, you know. But yeah, that's really all I've got to say on that. Sorry, you had one last question.
Slightly flipping question, but practically every crime book I seem to pick up is set in either Edinburgh or majority in Edinburgh, not Edinburgh, it's Glasgow. What is it about those two cities?
Well, you come back to the same thing. Crime is, I was going to say crime is big in Scotland. That's not quite what I mean. What I mean is, crime fiction is very popular in Scotland. The two biggest cities are Glasgow and Edinburgh. I set my books in Edinburgh, partly because I know the city very well, partly because I lived for a long time in the States, and so I have a good US market. And most people who travel to Scotland travel to Edinburgh or Glasgow. Very few of them go further north. And so if you're looking to set your novel in a real place, you want that real place to be somewhere that people at least recognise. And from my point of view, I mean, Ian Rankin comes from Fife, which is just over the bridge. He was actually reading for his PhD at the time he started writing. And so he was living and working in Edinburgh. So his novels are also set in Edinburgh. It's just one of those things. Sorry.
I just want to add, besides which, people from Perth are very, very good people.
Of course, people from Perth are fabulous. We all know that. Right, as I say, I'm going to wind up now because we've overrun slightly, and thank you very much for coming. It has been the end of my suspense not to have to stand here on my own. Thank you all.